It was the kind of Thursday night that tricks you into believing the sky is tame. The Midwest was wrapped in cold autumn air, the jet stream carving a fast corridor from the Rockies toward the Great Lakes. In the dim cathedral of the MidPlains Air Route Traffic Control Center, radar scopes glowed like small moons. Coffee steamed. Voices threaded the room with clipped cadence and calm. Ava Reed slid into Sector C, high altitude, west of Chicago, where the traffic picture looked like a constellation chart. Northbound cargo freighters, late-night connectors, one medevac turboprop surfing tailwinds at 19,000. She checked the handoff list and underlined a line strip. Northstar Air Flight 708, a Boeing 737-800 from Denver to Chicago O'Hare, estimated top of descent at 0027 Z. Beside it, she penned a tiny star, her way of noting the ones with tight fuel plans. Weather east of Madison was building. Nocturnal convection, thin anvils chewing up the usual arrival gates. In the flight deck of Northstar 708, Captain Daniel Morales flexed his fingers around the yoke. He'd flown the route 100 times, but the night air still had surprises. First Officer Jess Park ran a fuel cross-check, tapped the FMC. If we get sent north around storms, ORD might be tight. Morales nodded, glancing at the radar blob stretching like spilled ink northeast of Rockford. We'll watch it. Options are Milwaukee or Madison. In the cabin, flight attendant Mia Caldwell memorized faces as she always did. The young Marine in 21A trying to look older, the exhausted nurse with a novel, the couple sharing earbuds and a secret smile. Mia collected these small human inventories as if names could be parachutes. Back in the center, Supervisor Tom Neal did what supervisors do when everything looks fine. He walked, he watched, he let the flow go. Ava's frequency buzzed with the familiar rhythm. Northstar 708, descend and maintain flight level 260. Proceed direct bribe. Bribe was a fix with a story she could no longer remember. Most fixes had stories. Ava traced the line of aircraft creeping toward converging arrival gates and felt the math of separation ticking in her head. 6 miles, 1,000 feet, 20 seconds to think ahead. The green sweep of radar made distance feel like something that could be held. Then the room twitched. A flicker, the faintest hiccup in the glow. Ava's scope blinked, returned, blinked again. Somewhere behind her, a UPS battery chirped. Tom's head snapped toward the equipment rack. Half a second of silence fell across dozens of frequencies, the kind you hear with your skin. The sweep went dark. It was not the theatrical kind of dark. It was worse, a thin, surgical absence, as if the sky itself had been erased with a clean eraser. For heartbeat-length beats, nobody breathed. Then every controller in the room leaned forward at once. "Do we have standby?" someone asked. "Power's good. It's sensor," said a tech from the shadow of a console, already crouched by a panel. Ava keyed up, voice steady. "All aircraft on my frequency, MidPlains Center, be advised. Radar service lost. Maintain present heading and altitude. Expect non-radar procedures. Squawk and ident not required at this time." She reached for the strip bay, the old-school cardboard lifelines. Non-radar. It was a test they trained for and hoped to die of old age without ever seeing. She wrote times, altitudes, fixes. Hands moved like shuffling cards in a casino where the house is gravity. In 708's cockpit, Jess's eyes went to the TCAS display. "We lost ATC tags." Morales breathed once, slow. "We're IFR. We fly the book." He pressed the transmit. "MidPlains, Northstar 708, level 260, direct bribe." "Northstar 708, roger. No radar. Report bribe, then expect hold as published. Weather deviations approved left or right of course as needed. Report leaving." Jess glanced at fuel again, calculating how many loops they could dance before Madison became not an alternate, but a fact. In the cabin, Mia peered down the aisle where the Marine in 21A had finally fallen asleep. The nurse marked a page with a boarding pass and looked out at the blank midnight city light constellations drifting beneath, unaware that somewhere, in a building with no windows, the sky had just gone dark. Non-radar isn't the absence of control. It's the absence of seeing. The rules are there, carved into the bones of procedure. Report times over fixes, hold entries, vertical and longitudinal separation by math and voice. But when a center loses the picture, its people become both metronome and map. Technicians reported a sensor cascade. Secondary surveillance blinked off first. Then the primary feed stuttered under the weather's contempt. The backup path refusing to handshake. Not a blackout of power, but the betrayal of the eyes. In Sector C, Ava turned the strip bay into her personal war room. She marked 708 at FL 260, direct bribe, estimate overfix 009Z. Behind them, Mid-America 312, an E175 from Omaha, same route, 4 minutes in trail at FL 280. Somewhere north, a cargo 757 begging a deviation around the anvils. To the south, the medevac King Air with a cardiac patient requesting priority to Madison. "Tom, I need the long lines," Ava said. He nodded. Landlines, shouted across headsets, connected sectors, towers, approach controls. Radar or not, the sky is stitched with telephones. She called Madison approach. "MidPlains non-radar. Will sequence U2 to 4 arrivals via LNR and bribe for timed approaches. Any Nevades out? ILS is good. Tower lights are a bit squirrely, but we have them. We're IMC base at 12,000, tops 20. We can take timed at 3-minute intervals," Madison replied. 3 minutes between airplanes on final, like beads on a string. In a world that loves speed, 3 minutes is an eternity. But eternity is safer than guesswork. Ava spread her strips. 708 first to LNR Vortak, hold as published, expect approach time 0031Z, Mid-America 312 behind them, 034Z, the medevac gets priority and a direct to LNR if they can take it. She phoned adjacent sectors to hold westbound traffic, mile-in-trail restrictions, altitude blocks. On 708, Jess read back the hold with the clean cadence of muscle memory. Morales felt the subtle ache in his shoulders that only appears when your world tightens. "Passengers will feel us carve the racetrack," he said. Mia stood at row 12 with a trash bag that suddenly felt like a shield. She could sense the shift in the air the way animals do. A change in frequency. A quiet that meant listening would matter more than talking. In the medevac cockpit, call sign Lifeline 6, Captain Taryn Harper weighed angles. Her patient was stable but not generous. She needed a short path and a predictable descent. MidPlains, Lifeline 6, request direct LNR for ILS 36 patient on board. Ava looked at her strips, at the clocks, the arithmetic of mercy. Lifeline 6, proceed direct LNR, cross LNR at or above 13,000, cleared ILS runway 36 approach Madison via the full procedure. No radar, report procedure, turn inbound. Direct LNR at or above 13,000, cleared ILS 36 Madison, full procedure, will report inbound, Lifeline 6. The room breathed again, but shallow. Someone's printer jammed and an expletive whispered through. Supervisor Tom kept a hand on the room like a conductor with a fragile orchestra. "Tech says partial restore in 10, he said, not promising. 10 in this business is a small forever. Outside, the thunderheads stacked like cathedrals, their turrets flashing secrets across the cornfields. Morales eased 708 into the hold, inbound to LNR on the 360, timing 1-minute legs, engine whisper deepened by the change in wind. Jess watched the clock like a heartbeat. "We're baseline on fuel for ORD with another hold," she said, "but Madison keeps us out of the red." Morales nodded once. He did not like to say out loud when the edges showed. The edges heard you. At MidPlains, the phones chimed out their staccato. "Milwaukee approach, expect diversions. Chicago Center is non-radar. We'll meter you with holds at Petty and LNR." Voices layered, polite, professional. The way people talk when a storm is outside the house and you have to use hands, not hope. The Marine in 21A woke to Mia's smile and a plastic cup of water. "Bit of a weather delay," she said, and the young man looked as if he understood that sometimes a person's job is to make gravity softer. Ava's pencil skated down a strip, adding a minute to 7:08's expect approach time. She felt the weight of the choice before it arrived. Who went first when first was everything? How to keep one promise without breaking three? She thought briefly of her father letting her drive the pickup down the farm road the year she turned 12, his hand on the wheel beside hers. "Look farther than your bumper," he'd said. "Where you look is where you go." She looked 5, 10, 15 minutes ahead and did the math. The picture had vanished, but the sky was still there. It was up to them to remember it without seeing. There's an art to a decision you can't rehearse. It lives at the intersection of procedure and intuition. As Northstar 708 traced its last racetrack turn, the FMC ticked fuel with the dispassion of a clock. Jess ran numbers aloud so they would live in the air between them. "If we commit to Madison now, we land with 35 minutes in reserve. If we hold for ORD, the numbers get tight." Morales listened to the brass sound of those words. Commit, hold, tight. "We brief Madison," he said. "If ATC restores, great. Otherwise, we're not gambling." He looked down a sliver of aisle where Mia raised a finger, one moment, to a passenger with questions. "The burden of command is rarely heavy in your hands. It lives in the gaze of people who think you can fix the sky." Ava's landline lit. "Tom, that storm cell's chewing the edge of Sector E. We need to reroute the cargo north via DLL." She held two thoughts in one fist. Give 708 the first timed approach and slide Mid-America 312 3 minutes behind. But Lifeline 6 was inbound on the procedure now, patient on board, and every minute was a currency she could spend only once. Ava pressed transmit. "Northstar 708, expect approach time 0034 Zulu. Report leaving the hold inbound." Morales exchanged a look with Jess, 34Z. That put them behind Lifeline and 1 minute ahead of their original slot. It was tight but sane. Jess wrote it on the yoke with a grease pen. "Eat 034Z." In the cabin, Mia made an announcement that translated fear into information. "We'll be landing shortly in Madison rather than Chicago due to weather and an equipment issue affecting air traffic control. This is normal and safe. We'll take care of your connections." The Marine in 21A pressed the armrest with his thumb, as if he could hold the airplane steady by force of will. The nurse with the novel asked if anyone needed help. Mia tucked that offer into her pocket. On frequency, a new voice broke in. "Mid-America 312, pilot sounding younger than his hours. MidPlains, we're fuel critical for ORD if we hold beyond 0040. Madison is fine." Ava bracketed the word critical in her head. Critical was an angle. It asked you to bend the geometry. She could move 312 ahead of 708 only by stealing a minute that didn't exist, or by asking 708 to accept the second slot. Every choice with airplanes is a choice with souls. She called 708. "Northstar 708, how do you feel about arriving second 0037 Zulu to accommodate a fuel advisory?" She issued the request the way professionals do, neither pushing nor pleading. Morales and Jess looked at each other. 37 put them another 3 minutes in the air, 3 minutes less cushion across the ledger of contingencies. Morales closed his eyes for a heartbeat, hearing the uneven rhythm of a choice. He thought of the time in Albuquerque when a controller slipped a medevac past him, and he had thanked the voice on the radio for remembering what mattered. He thought of the Marine in 21A, and the nurse and Mia, and the idea that risk is not a coin you can spend twice. "MidPlains, Northstar 708 will accept 0037 Zulu to accommodate." He said it, and something in the cockpit eased, as if the airplane approved. Jess nodded, signed the new time on the yoke. "We'll make it work," she said. And in that sentence lived the marrow of aviation, not bravado, not heroics, just a craft honed to carry strangers home. Ava exhaled a gratitude she wouldn't have had time to speak. She watched the sweep of clocks. Lifeline 6 called inbound, needle-centered. Gratitude already carried in the pitch of the pilot's voice. Lifeline 6, cleared to land runway 36, wind 310 at 8. Back in Sector C, a tech emerged from the console like a swimmer from dark water. Primary might come back dirty, he said. We'll get ghosts, secondary's still down. Ava absorbed it. Even if radar blinked alive, she might prefer the clean certainty of strips to a haunted screen. Ghost targets during weather were a haunted house you didn't want to tour. MidPlains, Mid-America 312, request expedite after holding. We have an infant on board with breathing issues. The words cut the room like sheet metal. Ava wrote infant on the strip not for procedure but for memory, so she wouldn't forget that fuel and physiology were sharing a seat row tonight. She called Morales once more. Northstar 708, thank you for your flexibility. Expect further clearance to the ILS 36 via full procedure at 0034. If radar restores, we'll vector no gyro. Jess smiled at the thought of no gyro vectors. The old dance where ATC says start turn and stop turn, and you draw arcs like a compass in the sky. Understood, we're ready for either, she said. In the cabin, Mia knelt by the couple in 14C and D. The man's hands shook a little. I hate this, he whispered, apologizing for fear like it was a breach of etiquette. Me too sometimes, Mia said, honest and light. I count to 30 with the engine hum. I never reach 30 without something good happening. He laughed in spite of himself. She reached 30 and the PA crackled. Cabin crew, prepare for arrival. The storm prowled the edge of the route like a wolf that had changed its mind. In the control center, the power held, the picture absent, the people present. Choices layered on choices, the kind you never write down in the logbook, the ones that shape how you will sleep or not when dawn finally makes a promise. The night will always test the seam where error meets luck. As Lifeline 6 called clear on the runway and Madison's tower voice carried a breath of relief, Ava's attention snapped back to the en route maze. Non-radar separation depends on altitude blocks, time over fixes, and promises kept. But weather nudged 708 a hair, west of course on the outbound leg, and Mid-America 312 tightened its own circle to eat less fuel. In the space of a minute, the geometry narrowed. Jess watched TCAS draw amber intruders at the edge of its tiny world. We've got someone 3,000 above, crossing left to right. TCAS is a mirror, small enough to lie by omission. You only see who wears the transponder and is close enough to matter. But in the absence of the big picture, even a small truth becomes a lantern. Ava's landline hissed. Sector D reports a heavy cargo cutting around weather. Might clip your northwest corner at 280. She penciled a phantom arrow at the edge of her strip bay. Without the radar feed, the heavy was a rumor corroborated by math and professionalism. If he was early or late, a sliver of sky would get very small. Northstar 708 say DME from LNR. 7. Mid-America 312 say DME. 9 and turning inbound. Ava played the instrument. A minute at 230 knots is a certain distance. A turn eats time. A wind from the west stretches one leg and compresses the next. She moved 312's expect approach time by 30 seconds, a drummer nudging tempo. 312, expect approach 0037 and 30 seconds. Maintain 280 until established outbound. Advise procedure turn inbound. In that breath of delay, the cargo heavy called in, a deep voice thick with workload. MidPlains, Titan 4-3, level at 280, deviation left approved? Ava stared at the naked strip with no matching green blip to love. Titan 4-3, deviation left approved as needed. Maintain 280, report a beam Janesville VOR. On 708, TCAS coughed an RA. Traffic, traffic. Then a climb advisory softened into a maintain vertical speed. Jess and Morales followed it with the calm the training had solid into them. RA, we're climbing 500 to comply, they told ATC as required, voice even as their palms went cold. In the cabin, Mia saw the aisles sway and braced. Passengers felt the climb as a shrug. Ava's pen paused. An RA in non-radar is a confession that the geometry you believed in just touched the fence. Northstar 708, roger. TCAS RA in progress. Maintain RA. She slid a strip a half-inch in the bay to show what the screen could not. Two lines avoiding each other because people listened to a machine built by people who had listened to nights like this. Seconds stretched like taffy. The RA eased. Returning to cleared altitude, Jess said, the relief in the words, but not the tone. Ava put a tiny check mark on the strip. Another private ritual, a way to put a hand on the shoulder of a flight she would never meet. Supervisor Tom stood behind her now, silent. He knew the room had collected a kind of debt, a tally of favors and physics that would have to be settled at debriefs, with coffee that tasted like apologies. He also knew that leadership on nights like this was mostly about saving people from their own self-critique until the last airplane was down. Mid-America 312, procedure turn inbound. 312 inbound. Ava smiled. The beads were sliding on the string. Cleared to land runway 36, Madison Tower has you. She transferred 312 and watched the strip vanish from her bay into someone else's world. When 778 called inbound moments later, the interval was clean, carved by 30 seconds, and a favor Morales had given to a stranger with an infant he would never meet. Thunder rolled over the center like furniture being moved in an upstairs apartment. Somewhere a printer finally spat out a backlog of strips with the petulant rhythm of a child clapping offbeat. Ava rubbed a thumb across the edge of her headset. She felt tired in the way only precision makes you, as if every decision had been a small muscle flexed to trembling. Northstar 708 cleared to land runway 36. Morales answered, and in the cabin Mia drew a breath that tasted like metal. She checked the galley latch twice, 3 times, the ritual that pretended to be superstition, but was in fact faith in checklists. They crossed the threshold with rain stitching lines in the landing lights, the runway a pale ribbon in a dark field. Touchdown was firm, not pretty, and honest about it. They decelerated, exited, and stopped long enough on the taxiway for Jess to look at her hands and realize they were shaking the way a tuning fork shakes, vibrating with what could have been and what was. "Welcome to Madison," Mia said into the PA, her voice a little hoarse. "We're safe on the ground." People clapped, not because it helps, but because it does. At MidPlains, Ava marked the time. 708 cleared her frequency. She set the pencil down and felt the outline of her own bones, a relief and a weight. The night had not asked for victims, and still it had taken a toll. It always does. She looked at the clock. The picture was still dark. There were more airplanes. The debt of calm had not yet been fully paid. On the ramp at Madison, Northstar 708 parked in a pool of sodium light. The rain became a fine mist that turned breath into visible thought. Gate agents hustled like stagehands between acts, radios crackling with reassignment codes and the soft indignations of disrupted plans. In the cabin, people searched the aisles for answers that looked like faces in uniform. Mia stood at the front galley with a brightness that was not denial, but defiance. The nurse with the novel approached first, the kind of person who apologizes for needing anything. "I can help anyone who's unwell," she said. Mia pointed her toward a teenager gone pale with adrenaline's aftertaste. The Marine in 21A glanced at the window for the enemy he understood and saw only rain. Morales and Jess shut down the 737's heart with the gentleness pilots, save for machines that have just carried their people through a narrow door. On the radio, dispatch sounded like a friend trying to keep tears out of a voice. "ORD is still a mess. We'll bus your passengers or reroute to Milwaukee in the morning. Crew rest triggered. Hotel is set. Morales said thank you and meant it as a prayer. Ava's frequency, miles away, was a thin metallic thread again. The radar still hadn't restored. Technicians now used words like cold start and sensor array handshake and won't be pretty when it comes back. The room's brightness had shifted from the glow of equipment to the pallor of people who'd been smart for too long in a row. Supervisor Tom paced with a stack of forms nobody wanted to think about yet. He stopped at Ava's shoulder. "You're doing good work," he said, simple as laying down a blanket. She didn't look up. So is everyone. She cleared another flight to a hold. She sequenced another to a timed approach. She drank coffee that tasted like a dare. On the Madison ramp, a tug driver asked Morales for his autograph for a nephew who loved airplanes. Morales laughed, and the sound felt like a muscle he hadn't used in a year. Jess called her wife and said, "We're okay," and listened to a sigh cross 2 time zones, like a bird migrating. Mia texted her mother a photo of runway lights blurred by rain, and the caption still here. In a quiet room off the terminal, a family from Mid-America 312 rocked their infant, breathing now easy, cheeks flushed with the kind of color that erases bad minutes. The mother whispered, "Thank you to no one in particular. Gratitude has its own radio frequency, and tonight it found every set of ears tuned for it." At the center, a tech cheered softly as a scope flashed to life, then swore as it filled with ghosts, the radar equivalent of seeing double after a long drive. "Primary returns are messy," he announced. "We need to stabilize the filters." Ava looked once, decided the picture was not yet a friend, and returned to her strips. Non-radar had become not a fallback, but a choice. She found a second to feel what she had been postponing, the small tremor in her left hand, the echo of the RA, the memory of asking 708 to slide for a stranger's infant. None of it would show in a report. All of it would build a small, sturdy room inside her, the one where you keep the stories you tell only to people who have pulled the same nights. Morales walked through the cabin, the captain on the ground, the one who must meet worry where it lives. He knelt by 14C and D. "You did great," he said. The man laughed, embarrassed. "I didn't do anything." Morales shook his head. "You trusted us." "That's not nothing." He moved on, shook 100 hands in 100 different ways, each one a contract renewed. Mia locked the galley and found herself suddenly light-headed, the kind of dizzy that arrives when the lion finally lies down. She sat on the jump seat and cried for 90 seconds, which is 2 minutes less than the spacing Ava had carved between airplanes. Then she wiped her face, fixed her hair, and walked back out into a cabin that needed her to be made of light again. Back at Mid-Plains, Ava transferred another arrival to Madison Tower and wrote a final time on the strip. The techs announced a cleaner restore within the hour. She imagined the green blips returning like fireflies, shy at first, then confident. She wondered if she would trust them the way she had an hour ago. Trust is not a switch, it's a muscle that tires. Outside Madison's terminal, the rain rinsed the night. People smoked who hadn't in years. A driver loaded luggage with the reverence of a pallbearer and the humor of a bartender. Everyone carried a private ledger, what might have been weighed against what had been. The balance sheet would never add up perfectly. It rarely does. But the deficit tonight was light, paid for with hard choices and borrowed courage. Dawn has a way of making heroes look like people again. In a glass room above the control floor, the debrief began with paper cups and unfinished pastries. Supervisor Tom led, not with a blame board, but with a map of the night, the outage timeline, the weather pushes, the calls that mattered. "We'll talk facts first," he said. "Feelings later. Both count." Ava spoke in the dry grammar of procedure, her voice a little smaller than the one she used on frequency. She detailed the switch to non-radar, the landline choreography, the timed approaches. She documented the RA between 708 and the Phantom climb-through. She kept her hands still on the table so no one would see them tremble. A tech followed with sensor archaeology, a surge downstream of a regional substation, a hiccup in the redundant path, a filter algorithm that panicked at weather clutter and took its ball home. When the picture came back, Tom asked, "Did anyone feel it was usable?" Heads shook. "We've trained for ghosts," one controller said, "but it's different when they look like airplanes you love." Laughter, thin, true. Someone suggested more drills with dirty returns. Someone else asked for a redesign of the strip bay so it didn't jam when everyone printed at once. The list of fixes grew like a fence. You build fences after a night like that, not to keep the world out, but to keep your future self from going over the same edge. Then the feelings. They came out carefully, modestly, the way people undress in front of mirrors that aren't quite kind. "When I asked 708 to slide for 312, Ava said, "I could feel the weight of it. I still can." Tom nodded like a metronome set to empathy. "We carry the cost of the choices we make under pressure. That's the job. It's also the reason we don't do it alone." Across the field in Madison, Morales, Jess, and Mia sat with the company safety officer whose questions were kind and exact. Why Madison and not Milwaukee? Fuel math and weather flaws. What did the RA feel like? Like moving your hand off a hot stove you didn't realize you were touching. What did the passengers need? Mia answered that. A face they trusted, and water. Always water. Later, alone, Ava stood by the big window that looked over nothing but parking lot and sunrise. She watched a man in a reflective vest point airplanes with glowing wands, his movements a small ballet of certainty. She thought of her father again, the farm road, the lesson about looking far. She wondered if she had looked far enough. The answer didn't matter. She had looked as far as a person could look when the night turned the lights off. The controller who'd handled Mid-America 312 knocked on the glass. "The infant's okay," she said, and Ava cried in the quiet, the kind of crying you only do when the machine stops and your body finally speaks. No one wrote that in the log either. In a motel room, Mia slept sideways on top of the covers, shoes off but badge still on, as if identity itself had fallen asleep. Morales lay awake watching the digital clock, red numbers on the ceiling, each minute a small bell. He thought of Jess's grease pen note, 037Z, and how a number could be a kindness. The storm wandered off like an animal that had found another town to haunt. The center hummed with the prosaic courage of normalcy. The sky, indifferent and infinite, opened for business. People would fly because people must, and others would keep them safe because that is a promise society specializes in making. There would be new nights and new decisions. The ledger of courage and cost would balance and imbalance and balance again, and still, airplanes would rise. Weeks pass and the body pretends to forget, but the echo stays. Ava found it in the way she flinched when a light flickered at home, in the way she lingered half a second longer on each handoff. She booked a session with the center's peer support counselor, a veteran who had stacked enough nights to build a city out of them. "You did what pros do," the counselor said. "You made a call and it worked. That doesn't mean your nervous system won't ask you to replay it. Let it, then let it go." Morales noticed it in the half-beat before he took the runway on a blue sky day. He remembered the absence of the picture and felt a tenderness for the act of liftoff, the way the earth shrugs you into the sky if you ask nicely. Jess was promoted to captain on the Embraer and sent a photo of her new stripes to Mia with a caption that made them both laugh. "Still prefer Madison to ghosts." The airline's training department asked Morales and Jess to speak to new hires about that night. They stood in a classroom that smelled like marker ink and coffee and told the story with more math than drama. "We chose to divert early," Jess said. "You cannot buy back minutes with regret." Morales added, "And when ATC asked for a favor, we gave it. We might ask next time. The system works when the people remember the people in it." Ava spoke on a panel at a safety conference in Dallas. On a big screen, an animation replayed the sequence, little symbols sliding, holding, sequencing, what the night would have looked like if the picture had been there. "We are very good at teaching people what to do when everything works," she told the room, "and less good at teaching what to do when the picture lies or vanishes. We need more drills in ambiguity. We need to honor the cognitive load." Heads nodded. Someone from an airline with a crisp logo asked about AI. Ava said she would take a second pair of human eyes first, every time. Mia started keeping a journal called Only the Brave Remember. She wrote down faces, not facts. The Marine in 21A who hugged her at baggage claim. The nurse who left a note on a napkin that said, "Thank you for making the dark smaller." The man from 14C who sent a postcard that simply read, "I reached 30. She realized that bravery is often quiet, often unpaid, and almost always noticed by at least one person who needed it. At MidPlains, the techs installed a new filter that treated heavy weather not as a thing to be feared, but as a signal to be passed. The strip bays got an overhaul. The landline network got redundancies. The training department wrote a new scenario. Night without eyes. Controllers sat with paper strips and heart rates elevated and learned to find the picture in math and voice again. Ava visited the farm road one Saturday and drove it in her rental. She placed a hand lightly on the wheel and looked far. The muscle remembered. The echo softened. It did not happen the same way again. It never does. The next time came on a spring evening with benign clouds and a stadium game letting out in Milwaukee. The radar flirted with misbehavior and then remembered its manners. But a different choice arrived. A student pilot got lost in the Bravo, a cargo jet declared a hydraulic issue, and a thunderstorm ambushed a quiet corner. Ava was there, and so was the memory of the night without eyes. She noticed that her hands did not shake now when the picture blinked. She noticed she used the landline early and often. She noticed that when another controller hesitated, she placed a strip on their bay like a talisman and said, "We've done harder." Morales, inbound from Phoenix, heard a student's thin voice quaver and offered a relay on guard frequency the way pros do when the frequency is crowded. "Turn right heading 090. You'll avoid the airspace and be in VFR conditions." The student answered with a gratitude that sounded like a hymn. On the ground, Mia greeted a nervous flyer group with a joke she knew worked. Not because it was funny, but because it gave people permission to breathe. "If you hear me scream," she said, "it's because I saw a celebrity in 2A. They laughed, and someone told her later it was the first time they had laughed at an airport. The cargo jet with the hydraulic issue landed a little long. Fire trucks paced it like red guardians. The student pilot made it to a safe runway with a voice that had learned a new key. The thunderstorm ran out of theater and became just rain. The radar behaved, the center exhaled, no one wrote a report. But in the ledger only the brave keep. Small credits were entered. We remembered, we acted, we were kind. We did not forget the cost of nights when we had less than we wanted and made enough anyway. Ava drove home under a sky so clear, it felt like a promise. She listened to an old song through a new speaker and let herself think of nothing but the road. Memory is a teacher, not a jailer, she thought. She would tell that to new controllers when they sat at her sector with hands that wanted to be rock but felt like paper. She would hand them the old pencil she still used for strips. She would say, "Where you look is where you go." Air disasters make headlines because endings are simple to photograph. Nights like the one when the radar went dark live mostly in the quiet archives of those who were there. But the cost and the keeping are real. Morales kept the grease pen in his flight bag, cap stained with the digits 0037Z. Jess kept a screenshot of TCAS in training slides, a reminder that a machine can be both a savior and a liar, and that humans must adjudicate the difference in real time. Mia kept the napkin note. She tucked it into the back of her ID sleeve, where it lived like a paper charm. On delays, she would touch it and feel the night's edges soften. She began mentoring new flight attendants, teaching the kind of courage that looks like fetching water during turbulence and saying, "I'm here," without qualification. The Marine in 21A wrote her from a desert and said that, when he was afraid, he remembered her counting to 30 and did the same. Ava kept the smallest thing, a pencil worn to a stub. She liked that it was honest about the wear. She kept also a habit of saying thank you on frequency more than she had before. "Northstar 708 appreciate the help," she had said that night, and now she said it again to others because the system's bloodstream is courtesy. The infant from 312 turned one and breathed cake candle smoke, and a photo arrived at the center with a note. "You bought us 3 minutes. We used them to grow a year." Ava taped it near the landline with a magnet in the shape of a cow someone had brought from Wisconsin. The techs kept logs and graphs and new firmware. They named the filter patch Reed in the unofficial changelog, a joke and a tribute, and Ava pretended not to notice and brought cookies. The night did not become legend. It became practice. It became a slide in a training deck and a story told over bad coffee, and a reason someone somewhere said yes to a favor in a sky that needed just one more yes. Years later, they gathered in a conference room for a video project whose title made Mia laugh and cry at once. "Only the brave remember." The director asked them to speak not like experts, but like people who had been there. The camera rolled. Lights warmed their skin. Outside, an A320 lifted into a blue noon. Ava talked about silence. The 2 seconds when the picture vanished and the room took a breath, like a wave pulling back from shore. She talked about pencils and math and the unglamorous heroism of a landline. She did not talk about the crying, but it lived in the timbre of her voice. Morales talked about choosing Madison, about the humility of diverting not as failure, but as craft. He quoted an old instructor who said, "The best pilots are the ones who are good at being boring." People laughed. He said that boredom is what safety feels like most days, and that he had learned to love it like a favorite chair. Mia spoke about faces. She said the job was less about coffee and doors and more about the small dividends of calm compound interest. She talked about the napkin note. She talked about counting to 30. She looked into the camera and said, "When the lights went out, we remembered how to be lights." The director asked the last question people always ask, "If you could change one thing." Ava looked at the others. "I'd have asked for help 5 minutes earlier," she said. Morales said, "I'd have told the passengers sooner we were diverting." Mia said, "I wouldn't change a thing. Fear is part of the ticket price, but so is courage." The film played later in training rooms, on iPads at kitchen tables, on a phone in a break room where a young controller watched between sips of too sweet coffee and thought, "I can do this." The credits rolled over runway lights at night, over an empty strip bay, over a pencil stub. The last frame lingered on a montage of faces, ordinary and essential. A caption faded in. "The sky is big. So are we." People went back to work. Airplanes lifted and landed. The radar hummed and sometimes faltered, and then remembered itself, and in 1,000 small ways, every day, someone drew courage from a night when the picture vanished and the people didn't.